everybody, and welcome to my channel. It's Savannah, and here we go. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about my most recent birth. My son Jackson, as I said in my previous video, was born just over 6 weeks ago here at home. You know, home births already in themselves in the United States are, pretty uncommon. Not that many people have home births. Most births are done in hospital or even in birth centers. I think I read something one time that said about 1% of births every year in America are actually taking place at home. So home births themselves are pretty uncommon, but the way that I went about Jackson's birth is even more uncommon than just home births, because my birth was not attended by any medical professional at all. So these types of births are typically known as free births or unassisted births or something like that, and it just simply means that, like I said, there's no medical professional there. In my case, it was just me and my husband and my 2-year-old son at home, and Jackson came into the world. So anyway, as I was saying, I get a lot of questions about Jackson's birth. I get a lot of questions about how, how it was planned, how it went down, and things like that. I get a lot of repetitive questions. I feel like I'm explaining things more than once. So anyway, I decided to just go ahead and make this Q&A video, and I went ahead and asked on my Facebook page and on my Instagram page the other day if anybody had any questions about Jackson's birth to go ahead and ask them. So I'm going to answer them now. Before that though, I'll just give you guys a quick little rundown about how his birth happened. And labor and delivery were a total of about 3.5 hours total. So from the first time that I thought maybe, these contractions might actually be the real thing, until we heard his first cry, it was about 3.5 hours. So it was really, really, really fast. At the time that I started labor, I was 44 weeks. Actually, because he was born after midnight, so I was 43 weeks and 6 days when labor started, and then he was born just after midnight. So technically, he was born at 44 weeks exactly. Yeah, so anyway, let's just go ahead and dive into these questions. I have them on my phone here, so I'm just going to be reading these and answering them. So the first question that I have is, how did you decide to go unassisted? So a home birth already, after I had my first son, and he was born in a hospital, and it was a great birth experience. I had a midwife at the time, and they followed, all of my wishes and my birth plan, exactly what I wanted. They didn't push any kind of medication on me or anything like that. They let me labor in the water, and so it was a wonderful birth. So I know a lot of people decide to go to home birth in subsequent children because of a traumatic experience that they had at the hospital. That wasn't the case for me. I actually had a great hospital experience. It was in a hospital that's known as, they have what's called a baby-friendly initiative, and that's kind of where they put the baby and the family first. They do the 1 hour of skin to skin immediately after birth, unless there's something wrong. They don't push formula, there's no nursery, things like that. So it was already really in the realm of the kind of things that I was looking for. But after his birth, I really wanted a home birth, I guess. During my pregnancy with my first son, I watched a lot of birthing videos. I also watched a lot of birth videos with the pregnancy with my second son, because that's just kind of where my mind goes. Obviously, when I'm pregnant, I want to see how other people's labor and delivery goes, because that's the big climax of the pregnancy, bringing the baby into the world. So anyway, I had decided shortly after my first son, I gave birth, that I wanted to try and have a home birth next time. That was just something that I really felt like, oh wow, that would just be so amazing, not to have to load the baby up in the car upon discharge and drive home. You're just in your home already, not to have to worry about the bright lights and intake in the hospital and the strangers, because I really feel like during my first labor, that was something that really threw me off, was getting in the car, because I was really, really in the zone. And I had arrived at the hospital already at 8 centimeters dilated, so I wasn't at the hospital long before he was born. I feel like it was just something that really threw me off my focus. I was comfortable. I was laboring at home. You know, I had my kind of thing going as the contractions were coming. I was on my hands and knees, you know, laboring through the contractions, finding comfort in any way that I could. And then we had to load up into the car, and everything just got really, really painful because I was forced to sit down, you know, buckled up, and just like riding like that all the way to the hospital. And it was really, really uncomfortable. And then I couldn't walk. Going into the hospital, the contractions were just coming so close together at that point. So my husband had to push me in a wheelchair. And so then I'm talking to these nurses. I got a cervical check. I'm talking to the midwife, you know, answering all these questions, and it's kind of just throwing me off of my focus and off of my game at that point. I was more had to focus on other things. So I really decided that I wanted to try to have a home birth. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here. So yeah, I wanted to try to have a home birth. So when I got pregnant with my second son, that was the first thing that I looked into were midwives, because the midwives that I had with Andrew, my first son, they don't do home births at all. They have the birth center, and then they have the hospital as an option. So I immediately started looking into midwives who attended home births, and was actually really disappointed to find out that none of them in my area or anywhere in the close by area at all accepted the insurance that I had. And I had 2 forms of insurance, and they didn't take either one. So I was really, really disappointed about that. So I went ahead and went back to the midwife that I went to with Andrew, with my first son, and decided, well, you know, the second best thing to a home birth would be a birth center birth, because the birth center, you only have to stay there for about 6 hours after the baby is born. And so I was like, you know, birth center, that'll be great. And as you will know from my last video, I declined any ultrasounds during my pregnancy with Jackson. So because I wasn't getting any ultrasounds, they told me that I had risked out, is what they called it, of the birth center. I couldn't have a birth center birth because it was too risky, because they, you know, there were unknowns or whatever. And so my only option was the hospital. I feel like at that point I kind of toyed with the idea, well, you know, maybe what if I just labored at home too long and couldn't make it to the hospital or whatever. So I continued going to the midwife, and it was honestly about, I don't know, halfway through my pregnancy, things started getting a little more. The midwife that I was seeing, they weren't, I don't really know how to put this, you know, in a way that doesn't sound like rude or something like that, but they weren't, it was almost like I wanted too natural of a pregnancy for them. They wanted me to do certain things. For example, at 33 weeks, the baby was still breech. And because I had had no ultrasounds, there really was no definitive thing that said when the baby's due date was. So they were just going by my last period, which I had just gotten back before I got pregnant, because I was still breastfeeding Andrew. And so there was, you know, there were just a lot of different things that I wasn't comfortable with at 33 weeks. And when the baby was breech, they wanted to try to do an ECV where they turned the baby, and they wanted me to agree to go get an ultrasound to, you know, make sure that he was actually breech, and then go ahead and consent to this manual turning thing. And I had already had an issue with them because they didn't want to offer me an alternative to the glucose test, and the drink, the glucola or whatever it's called, made me extremely sick with my first son. And so it was just a lot of things kind of compiling one on top of the other, where I was, you know, started wondering if these were going to be the right people to be attending my birth, or if I was going to have to worry more about standing up for what I wanted and standing up for the decisions that I had already made for myself and for my baby and for my family, rather than being able to focus on laboring. So it was kind of just a sort of whole pregnancy-wide thing that, you know, just event after event that made unassisted birth seem like it was the best choice for my family. So that was a long answer to that question. So anyway, I'm going to continue on because I have a lot of questions to get through. So the next question is, were you at all nervous about it? And this, I would say, is literally the most common question that I am asked, hands down, about my unassisted birth. I have like 4 or 5 of those that same question, just phrased in a different way. I have, were you guys prepared for any complications? I have, did you have a backup plan? I have, were you worried about potential issues? So I get asked that question a lot, like a lot. That's probably the number one question that I get asked when people find out that I had an unassisted birth is, were you scared? Were you nervous? How did you, prepare mentally? What if there were potential issues? Did you have a backup plan? And so we only live about 10 minutes from the hospital. So of course my backup plan was if anything were to start going wrong, if I were to start bleeding or, the baby had issues after birth, of course I would either call an ambulance or we would go immediately straight to the hospital. Like that was our backup plan. I don't know what other kind of backup plan you could have besides just going to the hospital if things go wrong. That's why the hospital is there. But so was I nervous? Was I scared? So during my pregnancy, I had the normal pregnancy, I guess, nervousness, especially as I started going past my due date. I was kind of like, is this baby ever going to come? Is this baby going to be humongous? Things like that. Just, I wouldn't call them fears necessarily, but just maybe concerns, just, preparing myself for any potential outcome that could have happened. So I wouldn't say that I was nervous beforehand. I was just sort of, I wanted to be as prepared as possible. And so in my mind, in order to be as prepared as possible, I did a lot of reading. I read a lot of birth stories. There's one handbook that was actually written for, I think, like Cold War times when people were scared of like nuclear bombing and stuff, and so they had like these shelters called emergency childbirth, and it was written for, if a woman went into labor and there were no medical professionals nearby, like how could you handle this? And I read through that probably 2 or 3 different times, and that sort of just prepares you for bad outcomes that could happen, like if there was a compressed cord, or if the cord came out first, or if the baby came out not breathing or something like that. And so I really felt a lot more prepared after reading that and other books and things like that. But I also knew from a lot of my research that a lot of complications and a lot of things that happen, bad outcomes that happen in childbirth, stem from interventions, stem from whether you're getting induced and getting, Pitocin, and so these are not natural contractions, these are synthetic, they're caused by a synthetic drug, or whether, a medical professional goes in there and breaks your water, and then that increases the chance of a compressed cord or something like that, or if you get an epidural and, you're stuck on your back, and so labor could stall and the baby could be in distress because of your position and because of, depending on how strong the epidural is. And so, from a lot of my research, many of the complications that happen during childbirth happen because of interventions. And I knew that during this unassisted childbirth, obviously I was not going to be having any interventions. I wasn't going to be, reaching in there and breaking my water or anything like that. Everything was just happening naturally. And so I feel like that put my mind at ease a lot. And so it was just really mentally preparing myself for the big day. And as I said before, my labor was 3.5 hours. So it was from the beginning, from the first contraction, it was one contraction on top of the other. It was me just in the zone, me, laboring, me bringing this baby into the world. And so during the labor and delivery, I didn't even have any time for fear or worry or anything like that. And my husband was right there, with me, coaching me, pushing me on, encouraging me. And so there was no room for any kind of nervousness or anything like that during the birth. And so it was really just mentally preparing myself for the big day and any pregnant mother, whether she's giving birth in the hospital or whether she's giving birth at home, is gonna have, you know, worries and concerns and even fears leading up to the big day, because every birth is different. And so you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's gonna happen. And so the best thing and the only thing that you can do is just prepare yourself for any sort of outcome. And so that's what I did. Okay, so somebody else said, I love the idea of an unassisted birth, but I have a weird fear about hemorrhaging. So I feel like one of the most common reasons for a woman to hemorrhage after giving birth to a baby is when somebody pulls on the cord and they force the placenta to detach prematurely before the body is ready. And so I was very, very conscious about that, and Jackson came out with an extremely short cord. His cord was really, really short. When I had him up on my chest, the cord was tight. I wouldn't say tight, but I guess taut would be the word. It was, you know, there was no slack when I was holding him like that. And we kept him connected to the placenta for about 2 hours, I think. I gave birth to the placenta within about 10 minutes after he was born. I gave birth to him in our bathtub, and then we got up and went and laid down in bed, and I had him up against my chest and was, you know, just smelling him and things like that, massaging my own uterus and, you know, helping it to expel the placenta, and then got the urge to push, and the placenta came out in one easy little thing. But I made sure, I was very, very conscious about putting too much pressure on the placenta while it was still inside of me. So I feel like that's one of the most common reasons that women hemorrhage after childbirth. But another thing that I had read when I was pregnant is that if you ate, I forget what it was, like 5 or 6 dates per day, every day during your last trimester, that it decreased your chances of hemorrhaging. And so that's what I incorporated that into my last sort of month of pregnancy. I ate a lot of dates. I incorporated them into a lot of different like raw vegan desserts and stuff like that. And so that was another sort of, I guess, precaution that I took, was eating dates to help prevent hemorrhage. But I didn't have any kind of bleeding issues at all. You know, there was no kind of question as if I was bleeding too much. You know, again, I think, another thing that I was gonna mention about the hemorrhaging thing, I don't know how true this is, but I was prepared if I did start bleeding too much. This might sound gross, but I mean, you do what you have to do if you're bleeding out. I have heard from quite a few doulas, and I've actually read things on it myself, that if you take a piece of the placenta, if you're bleeding out, if you're bleeding a lot, if you can't get the bleeding to slow down or whatever, that you can take a little piece of the placenta and you can put it in your cheek. You can put it in between your teeth and your cheek, and sort of let that oxytocin kind of get, you know, through your body, and it'll help stop the bleeding. It'll help slow the bleeding down. It'll help stop the hemorrhaging. So really what you need to do to stop the hemorrhaging is you need to get your uterus to contract. That's why they do the uterine massage. Breastfeeding is great. It gets the oxytocin flowing, and in emergencies you can put the placenta in your cheek. And I was prepared to do that, you know, if the time came. I had read about it, and, you know, I told my husband, you know, if we have any kind of issues, I want you to cut a piece of the placenta off and give it to me so I can put it in my mouth. So there are things that you can do at home. You don't need a shot of Pitocin when you're hemorrhaging every single time. Okay, so the next question is, how did you deal with the pain? So this time, how I dealt with the pain, it was really, really fast. And I guess one of the downfalls of really fast labors are that they get really intense really, really fast. And so it was really manageable until my water broke and the contractions sped up and they amped up quite a bit. So the pain relieving techniques that I used this time around, and I'm planning on, since now this is my second unmedicated birth, and I used 2 different techniques. Well, not 2 different techniques, but I used different things in each labor for pain relief. And so I'm thinking about writing a blog post for pain relief during an unmedicated labor and delivery. So anyway, I'm just going to talk about this birth. The biggest things that I found to relieve the pain were getting up on all fours, that was the most comfortable position that I was in, and sort of just like swaying my hips and things like that. And then at the end, when I was pushing, I needed to get in the water. I needed to get in some warm water. I knew that that was going to help me feel better. And so I told my husband shortly after my water broke that I needed to go get in the shower. And that's where I spent the rest, all the way until he was born, in the shower with warm water running down on me. And that was the best thing. During the pushing phase, when I was starting to feel, the pain as the baby was coming down, my husband used a cloth with warm water and olive oil on it to support my perineum, and it also just helped support that whole area and helped with pain relief of that entire area, which was, having a lot of pressure and a lot of weight on it as the baby was coming down. But water was 100% the best thing. And before actually after my water broke too, but before I got into the shower, I have a hot water bottle, like those really thick plastic or whatever they are that you can fill up with like boiling water. I used that too on the bottom of my belly. That's where I felt a lot of my pain, but also on my back. I felt some of my contractions on my back before my water broke, and so I used that as well. So heat, water, that was the biggest pain relief for me in this last birth. Okay, so I guess this is another repeat of the question that I answered before. How did you shake the thought that something could be wrong and you'd need medical assistance? I didn't dwell on it, really, and that was the number one thing that I found that helped sort of calm any uneasiness that I felt, is I didn't allow myself to dwell on it, because I am a firm believer that the things that you think about and the energy that you are focusing on is what you're attracting to yourself. So if you're constantly thinking about the negative, if you're constantly thinking about, what if my baby comes out and it's not breathing, what if this, what if that, you're gonna be so worried about that during the labor. You're going to be tense, you're going to be nervous, and that gives you more of an opportunity of things to go wrong because you're just so focused on the negative. I remember so many nights going to bed, and the last thoughts that I was thinking is, I'm safe, my baby's safe, and my body knows exactly what it's doing. I'm safe, my baby's safe, and my body knows exactly what it's doing. And I would repeat that phrase to myself. I would, repeat. There was another affirmation that I used, which is my body knows how to deliver this baby just as my body knew how to grow this baby. So it was really just reminding myself and internally remembering, like, I'm made for this. So many women for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years have been giving birth. I can do it too. Okay, so somebody else asked, what supplies did you have on hand? And did you need anything in addition to what you'd have had for a midwife-attended birth? So we didn't really have any kind of supplies. We kind of just prepared for a mess. And so we got some tarps and the little puppy pad kind of things and things like that, something to cut the cord. We just used a sterilized, clean, new shoestring to tie the cord off. We tied it on the side closest to me and the side closest to the baby, like 2 inches apart, and just cut right in the middle there. And but yeah, no, we didn't really have any kind of supplies like that. So no, we didn't really have any supplies. The baby was moving constantly between contractions, so there was never any kind of moment or thought like that something could be wrong where we had to monitor the heartbeat or anything like that. Like if you're asking about a Doppler or a fetoscope or something like that, the baby literally, he was moving between every single contraction, and sometimes I could even feel him during a contraction, which was really strange and weird. But yeah, so no, we didn't have any kind of supplies on hand, really anything special. Did you give birth around your other children? So Andrew was there, my 2-year-old, and I was laboring around him. I'm going to be posting my birth video. Well, not really the birth video. We didn't capture the whole thing on video just because we had everything set up in the bedroom, and then I ended up giving birth in our bathroom. But what I do have, I'm gonna be posting that soon. But he was there for the laboring, and he was so sweet. He would come up to me and want to give me kisses and stuff like that. And I would just tell him, Mommy's having the baby. Like, the baby's gonna be here. Are you so excited? When it came time to deliver, he had actually fallen asleep. Like I said, Jackson was born just after midnight, so he fell asleep. He wasn't there for the actual delivery, which I kind of preferred because it was so late and because he was so cranky. So he fell asleep, so he wasn't there for the actual delivery, no. And did you have a water birth? I guess this would be a mix in between. I had a shower birth. So I wasn't actually submerged in the water. The baby wasn't born like underwater, but he was born in the shower with the shower kind of raining down on us. How hard was it to clean up? So because he was born in the shower, it's super duper easy. Cleaned out the bath. My husband scrubbed the bath down a few days later, but I wanted to get in the shower immediately, like right after he was born. There was, a lot of blood on me and stuff, and right after Jackson was born, he passed meconium, and so there was that dry, tarry poop on me. So I wanted to take a shower probably after, like 2 hours after he was born. What I did is I went in there, and there was, so this might be a little TMI, but you're asking about the cleanup. So there was mostly everything went down the drain. When I was laboring on our bed, we had a tarp set out over our mattress, and then we also had a mattress protector, like a waterproof mattress protector over the tarp, just in case anything went through that waterproof mattress protector. And then we had a sheet over that. Anything from when I had labor on the bed, my water broke on the bed and stuff like that, we just scooped it all up and put it into a trash bag and threw all that away. And then in the shower, everything really went down the drain. The only thing that didn't go down the drain is during the pushing phase. I don't know if it was right before I started pushing or, when exactly it was. Obviously, I was pushing a baby out. I wasn't focusing on what was coming out of me. But there were some blood clots that I had passed, and those couldn't go down the drain. So I just kind of scooped them out and threw them onto a little puppy pad thing, and then threw that away. The biggest mess, honestly, was just the bleeding afterwards. Anybody who's had a baby knows that you bleed a lot after you have a baby for like the first, 12 hours or so. And so that was honestly the biggest thing, is just keeping everything contained as I was walking around the house, which obviously a pad or whatever you want to use can do that. I actually spent, the first 24 hours after birth sitting on a puppy pad with no pants or anything on, and then I would just carry the puppy pad around with myself as I was walking around. So no, cleanup was actually one of my biggest concerns when I started looking into home birth, but it was a complete breeze, nothing too crazy or anything like that. That was like I said, one of my biggest concerns, so we prepared for it, and then we just loaded everything up, put it in a trash bag, and that was that. We loaded all the puppy pads up, put them in trash bags. All we had to worry about was cleaning out the bathtub, and it was just more just cleaning it out for my own sanity. I guess there was some blood on the side of the bathtub and stuff like that, so we cleaned it up with bleach. Cleanup was really a breeze, and my husband, he did most of it anyway, so I guess that's why I can say that it was such a breeze. But he honestly was such a rock star during the whole thing. I think that's probably all the questions that I have. I get a lot of the same questions, so now I can refer people to this video. But it really was just such a great experience. Giving birth at home, it was just so nice to be able to have the baby and then get up into my own bed and just relax. And my family is there, only my family, and I'm surrounded by love and by people who only want the best for me and know exactly what I want. So it was a great experience. It really, really was. But I do recognize, and I do know that this type of birth is not for everybody, that you have to want this. And so I don't, advocate for it in that way, that everybody should have an unassisted home birth or anything like that, because it's not for everybody. Some people, their anxiety wouldn't allow them to do that, or whatever. Maybe, other outcomes that they've had with previous births have traumatize them. So I don't, say everybody should have an unassisted home birth. But for me and for my family, it was the best thing, and it was such a wonderful experience. And I just love talking about it because I love getting it out there that yes, there are, for other moms who are looking into this, who think that maybe this is the right thing for their family, there are other women out there doing it, and this is how it's done, and here are the answers to your questions. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video because I know it's getting pretty long. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for all of your questions, and thank you for just encouraging me through that time period in my life, my pregnancy with Jackson, because I know during the end of my pregnancy, I got a little quiet on social media because I was really just focusing on mentally preparing myself for what was to come. And because I was just so overdue, so I was also overcoming those anxieties and those fears. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video, and you guys can look forward to my birth video. You don't see him actually being born, but there is a clip there where he's kind of hanging out in between two worlds. And so you guys can look forward to that coming up in the next, I don't know, week or so. My husband's actually the one who's editing it, so I'm waiting on him. Yeah, so I'm excited to share that with you guys, and I will also be making Jackson's birth story on my blog public very, very soon, so you can look forward to reading exactly how it happened and exactly what went down. Excuse me. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Also go and check out on the blog, now that I'm 6 weeks postpartum, a big thing that I've had to start thinking about is birth control, because I do not want another baby anytime soon. 2 is enough for me right now. But you guys, so birth control is something that I've really had to think about, and I already decided after a horrible experience that I had after I went on birth control 6 weeks postpartum with Andrew, that I was never going to take hormonal birth control again. And so if you're interested in any kind of, natural birth control options, I will leave that link in the down bar so you guys can go ahead and check that out. And I will see you in my next video.